The first time Darren Young saw his bedroom ceiling fall in, he was holding his daughter Emma in one arm and a bedtime story in the other. They just reached the part where the prince rescues the princess when the telltale crack of water damage gave way, sending a cascade of plaster and dirty water onto his bed. "Daddy, is the ceiling crying?" 6-year-old Emma asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. Darren held her closer, grateful they hadn't been on the bed when it happened. "No, sweetheart, the roof's just old, like I've been telling the landlord for months." This was the final straw. 3 months of late notices from the electric company, working double shifts at the construction site, and now this. Since Melissa had left them 2 years ago for her yoga instructor, Darren had been holding things together with duct tape and determination. But even duct tape had its limits. "Guess we're sleeping in the living room tonight, princess," Darren said, trying to keep his voice light as he carried Emma to their worn couch. Like camping. Emma's eyes lit up, finding adventure where Darren only saw disaster. "Exactly like camping," he said, tucking a blanket around her small frame. "The best kind." The next morning, after dropping Emma at school, Darren called his foreman to take a personal day, something he never did. The apartment needed immediate attention, and the landlord had stopped answering his calls weeks ago. With his tools from work and whatever supplies he could afford, he'd patch the ceiling himself. As he climbed the stairs back to his apartment, he heard frustrated cursing from the unit across the hall, a place he'd assumed was vacant, until a moving truck had appeared 3 days ago. He'd been so busy working overtime that he hadn't even seen the new tenant. The door to apartment 4B was ajar, and through it, he could see a slender woman with honey-colored hair trying to wrestle with a stuck window. She was dressed simply in jeans and a light sweater, but something about her, maybe the perfect posture or the elegant way she moved despite her frustrations, seemed out of place in their rundown building. "Need a hand with that," Darren offered, stopping at her doorway. The woman turned, startled. Her eyes were a clear hazel that reminded him of autumn, and when she smiled, his chest tightened in a way it hadn't in years. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been fighting with this window for an hour." The real estate agent assured me everything was in perfect working order, but I'm beginning to think her definition of perfect is somewhat flexible. Darren smiled. "That's Riverdale Apartments for you, may I?" He gestured toward the window. "Please, I'm Tessa, by the way, Tessa Vance." "Darren Young. I live across the hall with my daughter, Emma." Setting down his toolbox, Darren approached the window. It was the same model as in his apartment, old, wooden, and probably painted shut through decades of hasty maintenance. He examined the frame, noting the multiple layers of paint caked around the edges. "These old windows get sealed up with paint over time," he explained, taking out his utility knife and running it along the seam. "The trick is to break that seal first, then it's just a matter of muscle." Tessa watched him work, leaning against a box labeled kitchen. "You sound like you know what you're doing." "I work construction, not windows specifically, but I've picked up a few things." He worked methodically, cutting through the built-up paint. "So, what brings you to this?" "Architectural masterpiece," she laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to brighten the dingy apartment. "Would you believe me if I said I wanted simplicity in this building? You'll certainly get that, along with questionable plumbing and ceilings that occasionally weep." "Speaking from experience, my ceiling collapsed last night. Water damage, I'm off work today to fix it." Her expression softened with concern. "That's awful. Is your daughter okay?" "Emma, she's fine. Thought we were camping in the living room." He gave the window a firm push upward, and with a creak of protest, it finally slid open. Fresh air rushed into the stuffy apartment. "There you go. Good as new, well, as good as anything gets in this place." "You're a lifesaver," Tessa said, touching his arm briefly. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through him. "How much do I owe you?" Darren waved her off. "Neighborly courtesy, first one's free." "Then at least let me thank you properly." "Coffee. I've managed to unpack my coffee maker, though I can't promise I've found the mugs yet." His instinct was to decline. He had a ceiling to fix, and only so many hours before Emma's school let out. But something about Tessa made him hesitate, made him want to stay just a little longer. "I should really get to my ceiling, but I wouldn't say no to a rain check." Deal, she smiled, and he couldn't help but notice how it reached her eyes. Though I hope you'll let me help with your ceiling, it's the least I can do. Oh, I couldn't ask, you didn't, I offered. Her tone was firm but kind. I'm not completely useless, you know. I've painted a wall or two in my time. Darren considered his options. The job would go faster with help, and he didn't exactly have money to hire assistants. All right, but I warn you, it's messy work. I'm not afraid of a little mess, she assured him, following him across the hall. When they entered his apartment, Darren was acutely aware of how shabby it must look compared to hers, even with her boxes everywhere. The furniture was worn, toys were scattered despite his best efforts to keep up with Emma's whirlwind energy, and now there was a gaping hole in his bedroom ceiling with a bucket catching occasional drips. Sorry about the state of things, he said, embarrassed. Tessa didn't seem fazed. It looks lived in. That's more than I can say for mine right now. They spent the next few hours working together. Darren cut and placed new drywall while Tessa helped mix plaster and hand him tools. She was a quick learner and surprisingly strong, holding pieces in place without complaint while he secured them. So, what do you do when you're not rescuing neighbors from stuck windows? He asked as they took a break, sitting on his small balcony with water bottles. I'm a consultant, she replied. I help businesses restructure and find their purpose again. Sounds important, she shrugged. It's just problem solving, really. Companies are like puzzles finding where the pieces fit best. And what brought you to Riverdale? Most consultants I know live in high rises downtown. A shadow passed over her face. Let's just say I needed a change of scenery. Sometimes you have to step away to see things clearly. Before he could ask more, his phone buzzed with a reminder to pick up Emma. I've got to get my daughter from school. Would you mind if we finish this later? Actually, Tessa said, standing. Why don't I come with you? We can pick up some supplies on the way back. My treat. That ceiling needs paint, and your walls could use some patching in places. Darren started to protest, but she cut him off. I insist. Consider it rent for letting me invade your afternoon. He finally nodded, surprised at how natural it felt to have her join him. At the elementary school, Emma was waiting with her teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez, her dark pigtails bobbing as she spotted her father. Daddy, she called, running to him. He caught her in a hug, lifting her off the ground. Hey, princess, how was school? We learned about butterflies and their metamorphosis, Tessa offered gently. Emma nodded vigorously, noticing Tessa for the first time. Yes, that, who are you? Emma, Darren said, setting her down. This is Miss Vance. She moved into the apartment across from ours. You can call me Tessa, she said, crouching to Emma's level. I like your rabbit. She gestured to the well-loved stuffed animal peeking from Emma's backpack. His name is Hoppy. He's very brave. He protected me when our ceiling broke. I heard about that. Your dad and I have been fixing it today. Emma's eyes widened. Really? Can I help too? Absolutely, Tessa said without hesitation. Every good construction crew needs a supervisor. On the way home, they stopped at a hardware store. Darren tried not to wince as Tessa added items to their cart: quality paint, proper brushes, and even a small step ladder. This is too much, he whispered when Emma was distracted by a display of garden gnomes. It's nothing, Tessa insisted. Besides, I need most of these things for my place too. We can share. At the checkout, Darren noticed Tessa pay with a simple black credit card, the kind banks only gave to certain clients. She caught his glance and quickly tucked it away, but not before he saw the discreet platinum emblem. Back at the apartment, they created a system. Darren handled the ceiling repairs, Tessa tackled the wall patches, and Emma was in charge of quality control, which mostly involved telling them where they missed spots while coloring in her butterfly book. As evening approached, the ceiling was repaired and the walls freshly painted. The apartment smelled of paint and the takeout Chinese food they'd ordered when hunger struck. Fortune cookie time, Emma announced, distributing the cookies from the bag. Your kindness will lead you to unexpected happiness, Tessa read aloud, breaking open her cookie. What does yours say, Daddy? Emma asked, struggling with the plastic wrapper on hers. Darren cracked his open and couldn't help but laugh. A new friendship will brighten your home. Seems fitting today, mine says. Emma squinted at the small paper after Darren helped her open the wrapper. Adven, Adventure. An adventure awaits you, Darren translated. I like adventures, Emma declared. Like camping in the living room. Later, after Emma was tucked into bed in her own room, which had thankfully been spared any water damage, Darren walked Tessa to the door. I can't thank you enough for today, he said quietly. I should be thanking you, she replied. Best day I've had in a long time. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Darren thought about how easy it would be to lean in to see if her lips were as soft as they looked. Instead, he stepped back, clearing his throat. Well, if you ever have any more stuck windows, you'll be my first call, she finished with a smile. Good night, Darren. Good night, Tessa. After she left, Darren stood in his newly repaired apartment, wondering what it was about his new neighbor that made his heart race like a teenager's. Over the next few weeks, Tessa became a fixture in their lives. She helped Emma with her reading homework when Darren worked late. She brought over homemade cookies that were slightly burnt but made with obvious care. And on weekends, she joined them for movie nights, claiming their couch was more comfortable than hers. What Darren didn't know was that across the hall, Tessa's apartment was sparsely furnished by design, despite her ability to afford much more. The simple coffee maker sat on a counter that could have held top-of-the-line appliances. The walls remained bare except for a single framed photo of her parents, and her closet contained just a fraction of her wardrobe, with her designer clothes left behind in a penthouse apartment across town. Tessa Vance, CEO of Vance Enterprises and inheritor of her father's billion-dollar company, was hiding in plain sight. After years of people wanting her for her money, power, or connections, she'd needed escape. When her engagement to fellow CEO Richard Westfield had imploded after discovering he'd only proposed to facilitate a merger, she'd retreated to evaluate what she truly wanted from life. The Riverdale apartment was supposed to be temporary, a place to clear her head while she let her COO handle day-to-day operations. She hadn't expected to find herself drawn to the struggling single father across the hall, with his honest eyes and capable hands. One rainy Saturday, nearly a month after they'd met, Darren was surprised to find Tessa at his door, drenched and upset. My ceiling's leaking, she said, water dripping from her hair. Everywhere. And the landlord isn't answering, big surprise. Without hesitation, Darren grabbed his tools. Show me. In her apartment, water was indeed coming through in multiple spots. The ceiling bulged ominously in one corner. This is the same problem I had, Darren muttered, examining the damage. The whole building's roof must be shot. He climbed on her kitchen counter to get a closer look, then set up buckets to catch the worst of it. We need to relieve the pressure before it collapses like mine did. With careful precision, he poked small holes in the bulging areas, allowing the trapped water to drain into waiting containers. Once the immediate danger was handled, he stepped back, frowning at the ceiling. This is a temporary fix at best. The whole roof needs replacing, but good luck getting management to do it. Tessa sat at her kitchen table, looking defeated. I suppose I could move. Or, Darren said, sitting beside her, we could document everything and file a formal complaint with the city housing authority. Get them to force repairs. She looked up, a spark returning to her eyes. You'd help me do that, of course. What are friends for? Friends. The word hung between them, somehow both accurate and insufficient. Speaking of friends, Tessa said carefully. Emma mentioned something about you having to take a second job. Darren's face tightened. Kids and their big mouths. It's nothing, just some weekend work to catch up on bills. The medical insurance at my main job doesn't cover Emma's asthma medication, and with the cost of living these days. He trailed off, embarrassed to be admitting financial struggles. Most people in his situation would be looking for a better apartment, not battling to keep the one they had. But moving costs money he didn't have, and the security deposit on this place was locked up until he left. Darren, if you need, I don't need help, he said more sharply than intended, then softened his tone. I appreciate the thought, but Emma and I will be okay, we always are. Tessa nodded, respecting his pride even as she wished he would let her help. She had the resources to change his situation with a single phone call, but she knew that wasn't what he needed from her. That evening, with her apartment too damp to stay in, Tessa joined their camping tradition in Darren's living room. Emma insisted they build a fort with blankets and chairs, and soon all three were huddled inside, telling stories by flashlight. And then the princess realized she didn't need the prince to rescue her, Emma narrated, improvising her own fairy tale. She was super strong and smart and could save herself, but she still wanted the prince to be her friend because he was nice and fixed things and made yummy pancakes like Daddy. Darren laughed, catching Tessa's eye over Emma's head. In the dim light, with Emma's imagination weaving around them, something shifted. The attraction that had been simmering beneath their friendship rose to the surface, impossible to ignore. After Emma fell asleep, they carefully moved her to her bed, then returned to sit on the couch, a respectable distance between them that somehow felt both too far and not far enough. "She's amazing, your daughter," Tessa said softly. "She's everything to me," Darren replied, his voice rough with emotion. "After her mother left, I promised myself I'd never let Emma down no matter what. You haven't. She adores you. Some days I wonder if I'm doing enough. If I should be giving her a better home, better schools, better opportunities." Tessa turned to face him. "Darren, you give her what matters most: love, security, your time. I grew up with everything money could buy, but my parents were always too busy to attend my school plays or help with homework." It was the first time she'd hinted at her background, and Darren looked at her with curiosity. "Your parents were well off." "They did all right," she said, understatement masking the truth. "But I would have traded all of it for more moments like the one we just had in that blanket fort." Without thinking, Darren reached over and took her hand. "Well, our blanket fort is always open for business." They sat in comfortable silence, hands entwined, until Tessa reluctantly said she should go. At the door, the tension between them crackled like electricity. "Tessa," Darren said, his voice low, "would you like to have dinner with me sometime, just the two of us?" Her smile could have lit the darkened hallway. "I thought you'd never ask." Their first official date was simple: a local Italian restaurant where the owner knew Darren from construction work he'd done years ago. They were seated at a corner table with a candle between them, casting warm light on Tessa's face. "You look beautiful," Darren said, taking in the simple blue dress she wore. What he didn't know was that it was the least expensive item in her wardrobe, chosen carefully to not appear out of place. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, admiring how his button-up shirt fit his broad shoulders. They talked easily, as they always did, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. Darren told her about his dreams of starting his own contracting business someday. Tessa spoke of her consulting work without specifics, focusing instead on her passion for helping others find their purpose. "What about you?" he asked. "What's your purpose?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm still figuring that out, I think. For a long time, I defined myself by my work, by living up to expectations. Now I'm trying to define myself by what makes me happy." "And what makes you happy, Tessa Vance?" She looked at him, her heart in her eyes. "Lately, a certain handyman and his daughter." After dinner, they walked along the riverfront, their hands finding each other naturally. When they stopped to watch the city lights reflect on the water, Darren turned to her. "I haven't felt this way in a very long time," he admitted. "Maybe ever." "Neither have I," she whispered. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. Everything fell away: the financial stress, her secrets, the world around them, until there was nothing but this connection, honest and electric. Back at their building, they lingered in the hallway between their apartments, reluctant to part. When they finally did, after several more kisses that left them both breathless, Darren felt like he was floating. Inside his apartment, he checked on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully under the watch of Mrs. Gonzalez from downstairs. After paying the elderly teacher for babysitting, Darren stood in his living room, touching his lips and smiling like a fool. Across the hall, Tessa leaned against her door, her heart racing. She was falling in love with Darren, his integrity, his devotion to Emma, the way he tackled problems head-on. But their relationship was built on a foundation that included her deliberate omission of who she really was. The longer she waited to tell him, the harder it would become. The next morning, reality intruded on their budding romance. Darren received a call that the construction site was behind schedule, requiring mandatory overtime for the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Tessa's COO called with a crisis that needed her attention remotely, but urgently. For days, they barely saw each other. Darren left before dawn and returned after Emma was asleep, relying on after-school programs and neighbors to help. Tessa was constantly on video calls in her apartment, speaking in hushed tones about acquisitions and stock prices when she thought no one could hear. On the rare evenings when Darren made it home at a reasonable hour, Tessa would bring dinner, and they would steal moments together after Emma was in bed. Their relationship deepened despite the obstacles, each finding in the other a sanctuary from life's pressures. Then came the eviction notices. Darren found his tape to his door on a Thursday evening. The building had been sold, and all tenants had 30 days to vacate. His heart sank as he read the formal language, calculating costs he couldn't afford, new security deposits, moving expenses, time off work. He knocked on Tessa's door, notice in hand, only to find her already holding an identical one. "I just got home to this," she said, inviting him in. 30 days. It's not even legal. They're required to give more notice for a building sale. "Legal or not, fighting it takes money and time," Darren said, sinking onto her couch. "Neither of which I have." Tessa sat beside him, her mind racing. This was the moment she could solve this problem instantly, buy the building, find them better apartments, reveal who she really was. But the fear of changing how he saw her kept her silent. Would he still look at her the same way if he knew, or would she become just another rich woman out of touch with his reality? "We'll figure something out," she said instead, taking his hand. "Together." That night, after Darren left, Tessa made a decision. She couldn't buy the building without revealing herself, but she could find out who had purchased it and perhaps influence them through channels that wouldn't expose her identity. A few calls to her assistant, who believed she was on a sabbatical, revealed the buyer, Westfield Properties, Richard's company. The coincidence was too perfect to be chance. He must have traced her here. The next day, while Darren was at work, Tessa took a car to her penthouse for the first time in months. Her assistant, Janet, nearly fell over when she walked in. "Miss Vance, we weren't expecting you." "Just picking up some things," Tessa explained, heading to her closet for the armor she needed, the designer suit that signaled power, the accessories that demanded respect. An hour later, she walked into Richard Westfield's office without an appointment, bypassing his protesting secretary with the authority of someone used to getting her way. "Tessa," Richard said, recovering quickly from his surprise. "How lovely to see you. Sabbatical over so soon." "Cut the act, Richard. I know you bought the Riverdale apartments. Why?" He leaned back in his chair, smiling. "Business opportunity. Those old buildings sitting on valuable land, the development potential is enormous. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I've been living there. You." "Living in that dump," he laughed. Then his expression changed as understanding dawned. "Wait, you actually have been there. Why on earth would you slum it in Riverdale when you have this?" He gestured to the city view from his window, the implication clear: her wealth, her position, her world. "That's none of your business. What is your business is that you're evicting people with nowhere to go, including families with children." Richard shrugged. "It's just business, Tessa, nothing personal." "Then make it business. I want to buy the building." His eyebrows shot up. "Seriously." "It's a tear down. Not to the people who live there. Name your price." After 30 minutes of negotiation, Tessa walked out with ownership of the Riverdale apartments, having paid well above market value but not caring. She'd also extracted a promise from Richard to keep her involvement completely confidential, leveraging some information she had about his less than ethical business practices. Now came the hard part, telling Darren the truth. That evening, she invited him to her apartment after Emma was asleep, Mrs. Gonzalez babysitting again. She'd prepared a simple meal and opened a bottle of wine, her stomach in knots. "This is a nice surprise," Darren said, kissing her hello. "Though you seem tense, everything okay?" "Sit down," she said gently. "There's something I need to tell you." She took a deep breath. "I haven't been completely honest about who I am. My name really is Tessa Vance, but what I didn't tell you is that I'm the Tessa Vance of Vance Enterprises." Darren's brow furrowed. "The technology company, the one with the billboards downtown." Yes, my father founded it. I took over as CEO 5 years ago when he retired. Silence stretched between them as he processed this information, his expression unreadable. You're rich, he finally said. Yes, very. She reached for his hand, but he pulled back slightly. Darren, please understand I wasn't hiding this to deceive you. After my engagement ended badly, I needed space from that world. I wanted to be somewhere where no one had preconceptions about me. So this has all been what? An experiment in how the other half lives. No, her voice cracked with emotion. It started as an escape, but then I met you and Emma and everything changed. I fell in love with both of you, that's real. His eyes widened at her confession of love, the first time either had said it aloud, but his guard remained up. If it's real, why keep lying all this time? Do you know how many nights I've stayed awake worrying about bills, about Emma's future while you could have? He stopped, shaking his head. I don't want your money, Tessa. That's not what this is about. It's about trust. I know, she whispered, tears forming. And I'm sorry, I was afraid once you knew you'd see me differently, that I'd just be a rich woman playing at normal life, not someone you could really love. Darren was quiet for a long moment. I need time to think about this. He stood, and Tessa's heart plummeted. But before he reached the door, he turned back. For what it's worth, I fell in love with you too, the you who burns cookies and gets excited about butterfly books with Emma. The you who helps neighbors and isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. Is that the real Tessa? Yes, she said without hesitation. That's more me than the CEO ever was. He nodded once. Then maybe we still have something to talk about, but not tonight. Tonight I need to process this. After he left, Tessa cried for the first time since her father's funeral. She'd feared losing Darren by revealing the truth, but now she might lose him because she hadn't. The next day, Darren didn't come to her door, nor the day after. She respected his need for space, even as it tore at her heart. She used the time to set up a renovation plan for the building with contractors ready to start immediately, no evictions necessary. On the third day, a small knock came at her door. It was Emma. Daddy's sad, the little girl announced without preamble. He keeps looking at your door. Tessa knelt to Emma's level. I think I made him sad, honey. I kept a secret when I should have told the truth. Emma considered this with the straightforward logic of childhood. When I lie, Daddy makes me say sorry and promise to tell the truth next time. Did you say sorry? I did. And will you tell the truth next time, always from now on? Emma nodded, satisfied. Then Daddy should forgive you, that's the rules. Tessa smiled sadly. Adult relationships are a little more complicated. Grown-ups make everything complicated, Emma declared with the wisdom of her 6 years. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled piece of paper. I drew this for you. It was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands in front of what appeared to be a house. It's us, Emma explained. You, me, and Daddy, and our home. It's beautiful, Tessa said, her voice thick with emotion. You can keep it, Emma said generously. Maybe it will make you not sad too. After Emma left, Tessa stared at the drawing, seeing in a child's simple lines the future she desperately wanted. She decided she'd waited long enough. It was time to fight for that future. She crossed the hall and knocked on Darren's door, heart pounding. When he opened it, the dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. Tessa, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Emma told me she visited you. She did. She's very wise for her age. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Too wise sometimes. He hesitated, then stepped back. Come in, we should talk. Inside, Tessa noticed Emma was nowhere to be seen. Where's your daughter, the diplomat, with Mrs. Gonzalez? I asked for an hour to sort some things out. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same one where they'd shared countless meals. I've been thinking a lot, Darren began. About us, about what you told me. And Tessa couldn't keep the hope from her voice, and I realized something. I was angry not because you're wealthy, but because you didn't trust me enough to tell me. It made me question whether you ever saw us as equals. I've never felt more equal with anyone, she said earnestly. With you, I'm just Tessa, not a CEO, not an heiress, just a woman who burns cookies and loves a man who can fix anything except maybe his own stubborn pride. That earned a real smile. Stubborn pride, huh, the stubbornest. She reached across the table, and this time he took her hand. Darren, I love you, the real you just as you are, no conditions, no expectations. I love you too, he admitted, the words flowing easier now. But where do we go from here? You're a CEO, I'm a construction worker. Our worlds don't exactly align, don't they? You build things. I build companies. We're both creators in our own way. She squeezed his hand. And there's something else you should know. I bought the building. His eyes widened. You what? I tracked down the new owner and purchased the Riverdale apartments. No one's being evicted. In fact, I've arranged for renovations to begin next week, proper ones, with a new roof first on the list. Tessa, that's. He shook his head, amazed. I don't even know what to say. Say you'll help oversee the renovations, she suggested. No one knows this building better than you. In fact, if you're serious about starting your own contracting business someday, this could be your first major project. Hope flickered in his eyes. You'd trust me with that. I trust you with everything, she said simply. My heart included. He stood, pulling her up with him and into his arms. I'm still processing all this, but I know one thing for certain: I don't want to lose you. You won't, she promised, tilting her face up to his. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. 1 year later, the Riverdale apartments had been transformed. The renovations, overseen by Darren's new contracting company, had preserved the building's character while modernizing its infrastructure. Current tenants had been given the option to stay at their original rent rates, while empty units were leased at market value, a compromise that made the investment sustainable. Darren and Emma had moved into Tessa's apartment, which they'd expanded by combining it with the vacant unit next door. Emma now had a proper bedroom with a ceiling that definitely didn't cry, and a special reading nook where the three of them still built blanket forts on movie nights. Tessa had returned to her role as CEO, but on her own terms, delegating more, working remotely when possible, and making time for the family that had become the center of her world. She'd established a foundation that focused on affordable housing initiatives, with Darren serving as a consultant to ensure the projects truly met community needs. On a warm spring evening, they stood on the building's newly renovated rooftop garden, a space that had once housed only leaking HVAC units, but now served as a community gathering place. Emma was helping Mrs. Gonzalez plant tomatoes in one of the raised beds, while other tenants chatted around tables and grills. Not bad for a guy who just fixed a stuck window, Darren said, his arm around Tessa's waist as they looked out over the neighborhood. And not bad for a woman who was just trying to hide from her ex-fiancé, she replied with a laugh. Do you ever miss your penthouse? He asked. Tessa looked at Emma, soil smudged on her cheeks as she carefully patted dirt around a seedling, then back at Darren, whose eyes held all the love in the world. Not even for a second, she said truthfully. This is where I found my purpose. Which is love, she said simply. Giving it, receiving it, building a life around it. Darren knelt suddenly, taking a small box from his pocket. Speaking of building a life. Tessa's hands flew to her mouth as he opened it to reveal a ring modest by her former standards but perfect in every way that mattered. Tessa Vance, will you marry me? Not because you're a CEO or because you saved our home, but because you burn cookies and tell terrible jokes and make me happier than I ever thought possible. Yes, she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. 1,000 times yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, cheers erupted around them. Their neighbors had been watching, Emma at the forefront, practically bouncing with excitement. Did she say yes, Daddy? Emma called. She said yes, Princess. Emma ran to them, and they enfolded her in their embrace, a family made not by circumstance or convenience, but by choice and love. That night, as they lay in bed, Darren traced the line of Tessa's jaw with gentle fingers. You know, for a millionaire, you're pretty down to earth. She laughed softly. And for a guy who fixes windows, you've got a knack for seeing right through me. Through you, never. I see you, Tessa, the real you, and I love every part. As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, Tessa reflected on how a stuck window had led to everything she'd ever truly wanted. Not the wealth or the power she'd inherited, but the love she'd earned honestly, completely, and wonderfully.